Today, I want to make a video all about a little trick that I use to take many of my photographs to that next level, and it's called subframing. So, what is subframing? Well, I like to think of it as finding a frame within a frame. So, within your photograph, finding your subject, and then finding something within the photographic frame in order to frame it nicely, to give it a lot more emphasis in your image. It really helps to highlight what it is that you want to draw attention to, but in quite a nice and subliminal way. So let's break it down. What does subframing look like, and how can you add it easily to an image? One thing that I really like about subframing is that you can use it for so many different genres of photography. The one that immediately springs to mind is portraits. It's really good for portraits because you have a definitive subject, normally the person you're taking a picture of, and anything that you can do to bring more attention to the subject is generally going to be a good thing and help your subject stand out and make it a striking image. But I also use it many times in landscape photography, street photography, and even things like wildlife and sports. Subframing is one of those things that cuts across all different genres of photography, and it really just helps to bring your image to the next level. So without further ado, I'm going to give you a quick demonstration of how subframing can take a very basic photograph and how you can rework it to make it a lot better. Let's go take some pictures. And today we'll get a live demonstration. I'm going to take a picture of this pagoda right here. And I'm going to show you how subframing can take your image from very basic to the next level.
Keep it going.
This is kind of the most basic angle of taking a photo, just kind of straight on, no real point of interest other than the subject. And we'll compare this to a different scenario in a second. Whereas here you can see I can frame it quite nicely in between these trees, and it gives a really nice sense of depth. Okay, so you saw there the basic photograph was just head on of the pagoda, and it was just like your regular snap that you might see someone take with a phone or something. But then what we did is we had a look at that subject and had a look at many different angles. I did a little walk around the park and just tried to find an angle where it was really nicely framed by the foliage and the trees, etc. And then when I take this picture, you can see how different it is. It really adds a layer of depth and intrigue to it. It now looks like a pagoda that's like nestled really nicely somewhere in Southeast Asia, for instance, but it's just here in central London. Okay, look, pretty simple image, but there's a nice light on this canal boat right here. So let's have a look at how we could use subframing to make a little bit of an ordinary image just a little bit more interesting. So let's have a look at this scene. So here you have it. You'd probably normally take an image just like this, pointer at the boat, but looking at the scene, we've got this railing which is sitting just in front. So an easy thing that we could do is take our camera and just move it down here to shoot through this railing and create ourselves this little frame within the image. So now just have a look at the two different images that we got. Like I said, you're reliant on an interesting subject, and this isn't the greatest, although the light is quite nice. But you can see that subframing is a relatively easy way to just draw more attention to what it is that was meant to be the subject of my image, and that was the nice light on the boat. And all it took was 2 seconds and just taking one step backwards. Now let's demonstrate it with a human subject.
Hello?
Some of the great things about subframing is that it works not only for photos, but in a video setting as well. It turns things really cinematic. So we're going to position Liz here in the pagoda and just have this large doorway framing her, and then it really draws attention to her silhouette, and she can bust some stretches out, and it looks really good. We also took a couple of pictures, and you can see how it really draws attention to the outline of her body and what she's doing. The funny thing is too, once you start looking for these, they pop up everywhere. We stopped at a sandwich shop on the way back home, and very amusingly, they wouldn't take any in-person orders. They force you to go online on their website to order, and then they'd start making it in the kitchen. So I could snap this great picture of someone working away and ignoring the person who wanted to order their sandwich. You can see, although there are many things in the frame, more things than the basic picture, none of them take away from the actual subject of the image, just because of the way that they're surrounding it and drawing your eye into the center. Now let's talk a little bit about some mistakes I commonly see with subframing. First of all, just because you found a frame that you can use to subframe in your image, it doesn't necessarily mean the image is going to be good. You still need a subject or something of interest to be framed within the frame. You can see here there's nothing interesting in the subframe and it's not an interesting picture. A subframed image of nothing or of something not interesting is still going to be an image of nothing or something not interesting. So find your subject first and then work the scene around it would be my top tip to make sure that the image that you're getting is still one that you can be proud of. Another mistake that I tend to see is people think that a subframe has to be 4 sides and a very hard type of frame, like a window or something like that. But it really doesn't have to be like that. I just demonstrated how this really works with things like foliage and trees, and it doesn't have to be 4 sides. Sometimes just 2 or 3 sides can work just as well. As long as you're positioning things appropriately and you're really honing in on what your subject is, and the subframe isn't drawing attention to other aspects of the image, then you're on track to take your photos up a notch. And I've also got some top tips. I find that subframing really works for me in a number of scenarios. First of all, I talked about portraits. Having a really strong defining subject is obviously a really big benefit when it comes to subframing something, and a portrait helps me do just that. But when it comes to actually finding a subframe, I find some common themes. One thing that I noticed already is windows. These are really easy to use as subframes because they're everywhere and all around us. It could be a window to a coffee shop or a window on some public transportation. Whatever it is, a window is literally a frame. They're all around us and they're great to use in your photography. Another thing that we briefly crossed over is foliage. Things like trees and bushes, fences, all of that kind of stuff are all around us and are part of the visual patterns that we recognize in everyday life. I think this is what makes it work so well, because we've all experienced that feeling of looking through a window or looking through a bush or a tree and seeing something and thinking, oh, I'd like to be over there. And we're doing exactly the same with our image. Having that pagoda through the trees, across the lake, etc. makes me want to go over there and explore it. And it works conveying that through an image as well. Finally, don't overlook trying to get a different angle. Subframing sometimes really works when I take a picture from a lower angle and I use something like a railing or something, a fence that's laying a little bit lower than I normally would, and I can move it in the frame quite easily to take up that foreground and subframe it quite nicely. Finally, don't forget that subframing can both be in the foreground and the background of an image. I'll show a couple on screen now, but for instance, in a portrait, you could have them sitting in front of the window as well as shooting through the window. The thing I really like about this photography tip is it's one that I can incorporate into almost any image that I'm shooting. It's just something that I always have in the back of my mind. The process that I go through is I'll have a look around, I'll see the subject that I want to shoot, and then I'll just have a quick scan to see where it is I can put my camera, if I'm going to shoot through something or have something behind it, framing it quite nicely. Especially when it comes to landscapes, this can be really useful. If you're taking something on a sunny day, you know, it's 12 o'clock, there's no clouds in the sky and it's just plain blue all the way up, that's relatively uninteresting for an image. But if you can find something that will sit around your subject and take up some of that space, it could add some extra interest and make it slightly less plain. So let me know in the comments, is subframing something that you use, or how are you going to use it going forwards to add something a little bit extra to your photography? This is actually the first video on a series that I'm doing on little tips and tricks to level up your photography. We'll be honing in on things like editing tricks or compositional techniques, and we'll build up a little playlist of things that you can try to become a better photographer. So if you're interested in seeing any of those videos, subscribe to the channel because I have new ones coming out every week. As always, let me know in the comment section down below if you enjoyed this one or if you have any questions about today's video, and I'll see you next week.